The first time I saw Miriam Hart, she stepped down from that coach in a plain blue dress with dust at the hem and fire in her eyes. Behind her, two children clung to each other like shipwreck survivors, skinny, silent, and staring holes through me. I'd expected one woman, just one. She stood still in the heat and wind, staring at my cabin out past the road like it might vanish if she blinked. I kept my distance a moment longer, studying her. Strong shoulders, mouth tight but not cruel. I'd written 5 short letters. She answered with 3. We hadn't talked about children. "Mr. Brant?" she asked, voice dry but sure. I nodded. She turned to the boy and girl. "This is Toby, and that's Clara. They stay with me. That's not up for debate." I blinked once. "I didn't say you had. I didn't say a lot of things. You wanted company. I want a home, and that means them too." I glanced at the wagon pulling away down the road, kicking up dust behind its wheels. We were stuck together now, weren't we? I looked down at the boy, maybe 6, and the girl, a little older, maybe 8. She looked back with eyes too sharp for her age. She had her mother's fire, no doubt. "I didn't sign up to raise children," I said. "Then I'll take 'em and we'll walk, even if it kills us." She meant it. Something in my chest stirred that hadn't moved in years. Not pity. No, I'd seen too many beggars, orphans, and broken men for that. This was something quieter. The way the boy leaned into her skirt, the way the girl squared her shoulders, shielding him, the way Miriam didn't flinch from me, didn't plead, didn't soften the truth. I've buried 2 husbands, one from war and one from drink. I won't bury a child for a man's comfort. My hands were calloused from years alone. My bed was cold, my barn too big for one man's needs. I knelt so I could look the boy in the eye. He flinched. I didn't move. "You like chickens?" I asked. He nodded slow. "We got 3 hens and a mean old rooster. You help me feed 'em tomorrow?" His voice came like a whisper. "Yes, sir." I turned to Miriam. Her face didn't soften, but her shoulders eased. I stood, cleared my throat, and said it as even as I could. "Your children are mine now." Her lips parted like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "Then let's get inside before the sun burns us alive." I opened the door and let 'em pass, the sound of their boots on my porch making something old in me creak and shift. I didn't know it then, but I'd just changed the course of my life with one sentence. Not for love, not for God, not for duty, but for something better, a second chance. The house had never known so much noise. Not that they were loud, not at first. Clara spoke only when spoken to, and even then it was clipped, suspicious. Toby kept near his mother like he was tethered to her skirt, but still something about them, the scrape of extra bowls at breakfast, the soft rustle of Miriam's skirts in the hallway, the creak of the rope bed as 3 people slept instead of one, shifted the sound of my home. That first week, I found myself listening more than I ever had in my life. Miriam scrubbed every pot I owned twice over and lined the pantry shelves with cloth. She taught Clara to bake biscuits and Toby to hang laundry. I'd come in from the fields to find my tools cleaned and sorted, my supper already cooking, the children asleep beside the fire with a storybook between 'em. It should have made me feel like a guest in my own home, but it didn't. It felt like breath after holding it too long. One night, I heard Toby crying through the wall. A nightmare, maybe? I didn't move.
just lay still, staring at the rafters, wondering what kind of man it made me that I didn't rise to check on him. The next morning, he crawled up beside me while I was pulling on my boots. "Did you kill anyone in the war?" he asked. I looked at him. His hair stuck up in all directions. His eyes were serious. "Yeah, I did," I said. He nodded like he already knew. "I dreamed you shot a man, but he turned into a wolf and ran off." "Sounds about right," I muttered. He watched me a moment longer. "I ain't scared of you," he said. "Good." We were quiet after that, but I let him follow me to the chicken coop that day. That same night, I heard a noise in the barn, boards shifting, a low clatter. I grabbed my rifle and stepped outside into the cold dark. The wind was still. The moon hung full. Inside the barn, I found the feed sack slashed open, grain spilling across the floor like guts. No sign of the hens. One nesting box was tipped over, a single feather stuck to the door frame. Coyote, maybe, but it didn't feel like a coyote. I patched the door with wire and checked the perimeter. Nothing. But I kept my rifle by the door that night. Next morning, Miriam found a piece of paper folded under the water bucket. She handed it to me with shaking hands. It was a telegram, worn and greasy like it had passed through too many hands. No name, just 6 words. "She didn't tell you everything. I'm coming." I read it twice, then once more. Miriam took the paper back and folded it into her apron. I was hoping we had more time. I stared at her. "Who's coming?" "His name's Evan, my dead husband's brother." I waited. "He tried to take Clara after Jacob passed, said she was family now, his to raise. He's not right in the head. Got turned mean in prison and never came out right. I ran, hid, changed my name when I answered your letter. The sun crept through the window like it had no business hearing this. He don't stop," she added, "not until someone makes him." I looked at Clara and Toby through the window, chasing each other with sticks. I'd known them less than 2 weeks. Already I couldn't imagine that yard empty again. "Do they know?" I asked. "They know enough." I nodded, walked over to the gun rack and started counting bullets. "Then I reckon we'll be ready," I said. "They're my children now." She watched me a long moment. Then she said the words I didn't know I needed to hear. "Thank you, Tobias." It was the first time she'd said my name. And just like that, I knew this wasn't about company anymore. It was about protection, about keeping what little good we'd found from being dragged back into the dark.
Clara took to the rifle like she'd been waiting her whole life to hold one. She wasn't strong enough to cock it fast, but her eye was steady. Every morning for a week, I set up bottles by the fence, and every morning she shattered more of them. "You aim like you've got something to lose," I said once. "I do," she replied, without blinking. Toby preferred hammers and nails. I let him build a birdhouse, though no bird would trust the crooked little thing. Still, he'd glance up at me for approval every few strokes, and I'd nod like he'd built the Alamo. Miriam moved like she had a clock inside her, sunrise to sundown, working and watching and waiting. I'd catch her on the porch sometimes, scanning the tree line with a knife in her apron and that telegram folded in her pocket like scripture. I started riding the fence twice a day, not because I needed to, because I wanted to see first, wanted to be the first one they'd have to get through. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, they came. 3 riders. They didn't gallop in like outlaws, no dust, no howling, just a slow approach, like they already owned the place. I stepped out with the shotgun resting on my arm. The lead man dismounted. He was broad, shirt half unbuttoned, eyes pale and colorless like wet ash. His boots were fine leather, polished wrong for trail riding. He took off his hat like he was greeting a church widow. "You're Tobias, I presume," he said. "I am." "I'm Evan." Miriam appeared behind me like smoke. "Evening, Miriam," he said. "You've been real hard to find." Miriam didn't answer. "You can lower that gun," he said, nodding at me. "I'm here for family, not trouble." "She is family," I said. "You ain't." He grinned. "That's sweet, but those kids got heart blood in their veins, my brother's blood, and I ain't leaving without what's mine." Toby whimpered. Clara stepped in front of him like a little soldier. "Your brother beat my mama and died drunk under a horse. You ain't got rights to nothing." Evan's grin vanished. "You teaching them to talk like that, Tobias?" I raised the shotgun, just enough to be clear. "You've said your piece. Now ride off before you get an answer you don't like." Evan looked at Miriam. "You gonna let him talk for you?" "I asked Tobias to marry me. He said yes." We hadn't spoken those words before. My heart kicked against my ribs. Evan's lip curled. "You got till sunrise," he said, turning back to his horse. "Then I take the kids or I burn it all down." They rode off without another word. Inside, I barred every window, topped the lamps, countered ammunition twice. "You proposed?" I asked, voice low. Miriam smirked. "Seemed the quickest way to make it clear. Didn't figure you'd argue." "I don't," I said. She kissed my cheek, just once, then turned away. That night, Clara slept with the rifle beside her bed. Toby curled beside me on the floor, clutching a wooden horse I'd whittled for him the week before. Outside, the wind picked up. The house creaked. I didn't sleep, and I didn't pray. I'd made a vow to protect him. If Evan came back tomorrow, he'd find out just how serious I was.
I woke before dawn and dressed in silence. Miriam was already up, braiding Clara's hair like it was just another morning, not the one we might all die in. Toby sat at the table, legs swinging under the bench, clutching a biscuit he hadn't taken a bite from. The sun hadn't even broken the edge of the hills when I stepped outside and scanned the field. Frost still clung to the grass. The air was so still it made your ears ring. We'd spent half the night reinforcing the windows and piling furniture against the doors. I dug trenches out back and laid spikes along the barn's entrance. I wasn't a soldier anymore, but I remembered enough. Clara sat near the front window with the rifle across her knees, wrapped in a blanket like it was just another morning, not the one we might all die in. Miriam loaded the second rifle without trembling. "He'll come fast. He always does when he's angry." I nodded. That's when people make mistakes. We didn't wait long. Just after sunrise, they came back, Evan and 2 others this time, riding hard, kicking up cold dirt behind them. They pulled up 10 yards from the porch, and Evan flung something to the ground. The dead calf. Its throat was slit, guts spilling out in the frost, flies already circled. Message received. "You've got till I count to 10, Evan shouted, hand resting on his holster. "Then I come get what's mine." Clara's breath hitched beside me. I held up a hand. "Wait," I whispered. "1." Toby whimpered. "2." Clara's grip tightened. 3. Miriam stood at the far window, rifle raised. 4. I saw his hand twitch. 5. And that's when Clara fired. The crack echoed like thunder off the hills. Evan's hat flew from his head, and he ducked low, cursing. His men scattered like spooked rabbits. That's all the invitation I needed. I threw open the door and stepped out, gun raised. You wanted a fight, you found one. Bullets tore into the porch posts. Wood splintered. I returned fire, aiming low. One man dropped, screaming, hitting the thigh. The other turned tail, his horse bolting. Evan ducked behind a water trough, shouting curses. I advanced slow, firing only when he peeked out. Then he made a run for the barn. I followed. Inside, the light was thin and cold. Dust danced in the beams, and every breath came with the copper taste of war. He tried to flank me around a post, but I caught the shadow of his boots first. We collided hard. His fist struck my cheek, and the shotgun skidded from my hands. We wrestled in the hay like animals, grunting, snarling. He was stronger than I expected, fueled by something deeper than rage. But I'd fought in worse barns than this one. I drove my knee into his ribs, rolled us over, grabbed a pitchfork and held it an inch from his throat. He stilled. "You gonna kill me?" he hissed. "No," I said, breathing hard. "You're going to face justice in chains, like the animal you are." He spat blood at my feet. "They ain't your kids." "They are now." When I dragged him out, Clara had the rifle pointed at his head. Miriam stood over the wounded man on the ground, keeping him from crawling away. "You done?" she asked. "I'm done," I said. The sheriff arrived that afternoon. I told him what I needed to know, and he saw the truth in the mess. 2 attackers, 1 self-defense, 1 survivor bound in a shed. He took Evan. Before he left, he looked at Clara. "You the one shot first?" Clara nodded once. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Remind me never to play cards with you." That night, we lit a fire so bright the whole ridge glowed. Toby curled up in Miriam's lap. Clara slept with the rifle beside her again, but this time she smiled in her sleep. Miriam poured me coffee and handed it over with a hand that lingered against mine. We didn't speak of what happened. Didn't need to. We'd crossed a line together, not just of blood and bullets, but of family. Real family.
The next morning, there was no blood, no gunshots, no dead calf in the yard. Just dew on the porch rail and the soft cluck of hens that somehow found their way back to the coop. For the first time in weeks, I sat on the step and drank coffee without my rifle leaning against the wall. The bruise on my jaw still throbbed. My ribs ached when I breathed too deep. But the world didn't feel like it was closing in anymore. Toby padded out barefoot and sat beside me, his little shoulders brushing mine. We watched the sun climb the hills together, both of us quiet, like the earth might shift if we spoke too soon. Then he said it. "Thanks, Dad." He didn't look up when he said it, just spoke it like it had always been true. My chest cracked open like a damn canyon. I didn't move, didn't speak, couldn't. After a long minute, I reached over and tousled his hair, rough but gentle. He leaned into it, stayed right there. Inside, I heard Clara helping Miriam stir the fire back to life. Her laugh, light and sharp, cut through the house like bird song. There hadn't been laughter here in years. Miriam stepped out a moment later, apron tied, cheeks still flushed from the stove. She leaned against the post beside me. We didn't need to say anything. Not yet. The days that followed were soft, like the earth itself was trying to remember how to be calm. I taught Clara how to repair the fencing. She was stronger than she looked, stubborn as a fence post. She'd mutter curses under her breath when the wire bit her gloves, and I'd pretend not to hear. Toby started carving again, little wooden horses, dogs, people. One afternoon, he handed me a tiny figure, a man with a wide hat, holding a child on his hip. "That's you, Dad. That's me." I kept it in my shirt pocket for 3 days before I dared set it on the mantel. Miriam cleaned out the spare room, turned it into a proper school corner. She'd sit with both kids at the table after chores, going over letters and numbers and the Bible. Her voice softened in that space, gentle, patient. She'd never had the chance to teach before. "You're good at it," I said once. She smiled. No one ever told me I could be. One night she brought out a bottle of wine, said it'd been in her trunk since Kansas. We drank it from tin mugs while the kids slept, firelight flickering against the log walls. "I thought I'd be gone by now," she said quietly. "Gone?" "After Evan, after the worst of it." She stared into the flame. "I thought you'd see me for what I was, a woman with baggage, too much past, too many shadows." I shook my head. "You brought light into this place, Miriam. Even your shadows are softer than what came before." She looked at me then. Not just looked, saw me. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. The understanding passed between us like smoke from the fire. We'd survived something violent, yes, but now came the harder part, building. Not because we were afraid, but because we finally had something worth keeping. Later that week, I caught Toby drawing stick figures in the dirt beside the coop. "Who's that?" I asked. He pointed to a tall one. "That's you." Then a short one. "Mama." Then himself and Clara. Then, at the edge, another figure. "Who's that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe the baby, if Mama ever has one." I stood there a long moment, boots in the dust, wind tugging at my hat. "Yeah, maybe." Inside the cabin, I heard Miriam singing, soft and sure. And for the first time in my whole damn life, I let the sound of it settle deep inside me and stay.
The season turned before we noticed. One morning, frost clung to the garden beds, and Clara had to break the ice off the water pail with a rock. I taught her how to brace it with her boot, like I used to when I was her age. Miriam planted pear trees out by the ridge. Said she wanted something to watch grow over the years. I dug the holes. She pressed each sapling in like it was a child's head she meant to cradle. Toby named them, all 4. Life didn't feel like waiting anymore. Then came Eli McCrae. I was mending the porch rail when I saw the rider. He wasn't in a rush, just a steady approach, his coat flapping with the wind, hat low over his brow. Miriam stepped out as he dismounted. One look at him and I saw it. Recognition and caution, dancing like old fire behind her eyes. "Eli," she said, arms crossed tight. "Hello, Miriam." She didn't move. I stayed close. Clara peered through the window, and I could feel her breath catch. "I mean no harm," he said, hands raised. "Just came to speak. One night, if you'll allow it."
I didn't like his face. Too smooth, too clean. But Miriam nodded. That evening he sat at our table like he belonged there, picked at his stew, told stories with too many gaps. I watched him the whole time. So did Clara. Toby curled against his mama and refused to say a word. After supper, Miriam asked me to give him a moment. I didn't want to, but I did. Took the kids out to the barn, let them count nails and pretend they were on patrol. When I came back in, Eli was gone. Miriam sat by the hearth, her hands shaking in her lap. "Who is he?" I asked. She looked up like she hadn't realized I'd come in. "When I was 17, Eli was the first man who ever said he loved me. Asked me to run off with him, and I nearly did. But he left town one night and never came back." She swallowed. "He says he wrote, says his letters never reached me. Said he tried to find me when he got back from New Orleans, but heard I'd married Jacob instead. And now? Now he's sorry, and he brought proof." She handed me an old, yellowed letter, addressed to her, never opened, never delivered. I read it. It wasn't bad. Not flowery, not desperate. Just a boy trying to be a man and missing his chance. He says he thought about me every day, that when he heard about Evan being taken in, he knew it was safe to find me. I looked into the fire. "You believe him?" I asked. "I believe he's sorry." That was enough. The next morning, Eli stood by his horse, reins in hand. "I never meant to hurt you," he told her. She nodded. "But you did." "I know." He swallowed hard. "You happy?" She glanced at me. I didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "I'm happy." He nodded, mounted. Before he rode off, he looked at me once. "She deserves everything." "I know." Then he rode into the hills and never looked back. Miriam didn't speak much that day, but her steps were lighter, her shoulders straighter. "Regret's a strange thing," she said that night. "Sometimes you don't feel it until the weight's been lifted." I understood that more than I could say. We sat in silence a long time, fire crackling low, children asleep in the next room. Then she reached for my hand, held it like it was something holy. And I knew what forgiveness looked like. Not for the man who left, but for the woman who had carried the memory all this way.
I'd just finished shoeing the mule when I saw the cabin door swinging in the wind, wide open, no sound inside. Something in my gut twisted hard. I dropped the hammer and ran. "Miriam!" I shouted. "Clara! Toby!" No answer, just the creak of that damn door. Inside, Clara was on the floor, struggling to sit up. Blood at her temple, not a lot, but enough to make my heart seize. "Mama's with the hens," she gasped. "Toby, he's gone." My whole body locked up. "What do you mean, gone?" She said, "Man, I heard Toby yell. Then, nothing." By the time Miriam came sprinting in, I was already saddling the bay.
She clutched Clara close, eyes wide, wild. I rode with nothing but my revolver, a rope, and the cold taste of vengeance in my mouth. Tracks weren't hard to follow. Fresh boot prints and soft dirt, smaller ones dragging behind. Whoever took him was careless or desperate. 3 miles out, near Dry Willow Creek, I found him. A man I didn't recognize, lean, sunburnt, with a busted hat and a limp. He had Toby tied to a tree like an animal. My boy was crying, but quiet, brave. I dismounted behind the ridge and crept close. The man was talking to himself, pacing, muttering something about debts and trade. I couldn't hear it all. Then I saw his pistol, holstered, thank God. I stepped out slow, gun drawn. You've got one chance. He spun, startled, eyes wide. Who the hell? I said, one chance. Toby's eyes lit up. Dad! The man froze, hands half raised. I just needed leverage. Your wife, she put Evan away. Some folks owed him. I was going to trade the kid. That's all. You tied a child, I said. He didn't hurt him. You will if I shoot wide. He went still. Untie him, I said. He hesitated. Then slowly he cut the rope. Toby bolted for me, wrapped around my leg like he'd never let go. I holstered my gun, walked over to the man. You ride out of this county, today, now, and if I ever see you near my land again, I won't hesitate. He backed away, trembling. I ain't a killer, he muttered. No, I said, but I used to be. He didn't argue, just limped off into the brush like a kicked dog. I held Toby all the way home, didn't speak, didn't cry, just kept my hand on his chest to feel the life there. When we rode up, Miriam ran to us, fell to her knees, sobbing, clutching him like he'd been born again. Clara stood at the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched like she'd failed somehow. You did nothing wrong, I told her. You're brave. You stood your ground. She nodded once, eyes wet. That night, I sat by the fire with Toby on my lap, still trembling in his sleep. Miriam watched me from the hearth. You didn't kill him. No, you could have. I wanted to. She nodded. But you didn't. I looked at her, then the children. Used to be, I only knew how to protect what was mine by spilling blood. Now I know better. She came over, placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not the man you were, Tobias. No, I'm not. In that moment, I realized something deeper than fear or anger had passed through me. Fatherhood wasn't just about standing between a child and danger. It was about choosing every day to be better. For them, and for the man I wanted to become.
The days after the kidnapping passed slow and steady, like God himself was holding time gentle for our sake. Toby stuck to me more than ever, his hand always near mine, eyes never straying far. Clara sharpened her aim, added knife practice to her chores, like she'd never be caught helpless again. And Miriam started humming again while she worked, songs I didn't recognize, some sweet, some mournful, all of 'em full of something I now understood, survival and the grace to still sing anyway. One evening, near dusk, I found her standing where we planted the pear trees. The leaves had gone golden and were starting to fall. I said, "You were right to choose this spot." She looked over her shoulder. "Sunlight holds longer here." We stood in silence a while.
Then I reached into my vest and pulled out the ring. It wasn't much, just a plain band I'd bought from a trader in Dry Willow and kept for weeks in my drawer. I know I said yes once already, back when it was about making a point to Evan. She smiled. I remember. I said, but this time it's not about him, or protection, or the past. It's just about you. I took her hand, calloused and warm, and held the ring out like it weighed more than it should. Will you marry me, Miriam Hart? For real this time? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up, ran a finger down the scar that had split my cheek since the war. Then she looked me dead in the eye. If we do this, she said, you're not just marrying me. You're marrying them, too. You know that, right? I said, I already did. That day I said, your children are mine now. That ain't changed. It never will. She swallowed, blinked once, and then finally nodded. Yes, she said, and her voice cracked a little. Yes, I'll marry you. I slipped the ring on her finger, and she smiled down at it like it glowed. We didn't throw a wedding, no preacher, no feast, just a sunrise 2 days later, the 4 of us standing in the field behind the house, holding hands while Clara read a psalm and Toby threw wildflowers like it was the 4th of July. That night, Clara climbed onto my lap after supper and handed me a piece of paper. She'd drawn the cabin, the trees, the 4 of us, stick figures all, but smiling big. I stuck it on the wall above the hearth with a nail. We sat by the fire, all of us, the warmth pulling our shadows long behind us. No one said word, but I think we all knew something sacred had settled in the wood of that house, in the soil beneath our feet, in the spaces between each heartbeat. Not safety, that would come and go, but belonging. I looked at Miriam, then at the kids, and thought, this land was once just dirt, this cabin just wood and stone, but now it was ours, rooted deep, and for the first time in a long, hard life, I understood the truth of it. You don't always get the family you're born into. Sometimes the best ones are the ones you choose.